While Hollywood loves showing us gleaming marble columns and toga-clad senators lounging in sunny courtyards, the reality for Roman peasants was more like surviving in history's most organised icebox. When winter hit the empire, from Britain's foggy moors to Germania's frozen forests, ordinary Romans had to get creative or become ancient popsicles. To understand just how brutal Roman winters could be, you need to forget everything you think you know about the warm Mediterranean climate. Archaeological evidence paints a picture that would make even modern winter survival experts nervous. In northern provinces like Britain and Germania, temperatures regularly plummeted to 10 degree fall, cold enough to freeze a Roman soldier's feet right inside his boots. Tacitus wasn't exaggerating when he described Germanic campaigns where legionnaires literally had to be cut free from their frozen footwear. The archaeological record tells an even grimmer story. Excavations at Roman sites across the empire reveal ice formations in wells that stayed frozen for months, and grain storage areas show clear evidence of freeze damage that destroyed entire winter food supplies. Climate researchers studying ice cores and tree rings have discovered that the Roman period experienced several Little Ice Age events, with winters that were significantly harsher than anything Europe had seen in centuries. Even Rome itself wasn't safe from winter's fury. Historical records document multiple instances of snow falling in the Eternal City, with some storms so severe they collapsed roofs and froze the Tiber River solid. One particularly brutal winter in 398 CE left snow on Roman streets for weeks, something that stunned contemporary writers who thought their city was immune to such extremes. Rural communities bore the worst of it. Archaeological evidence from peasant settlements shows that winter mortality rates spiked dramatically during these cold periods, with entire families sometimes found frozen in their homes. Roman military documents from northern garrisons record temperatures that were 15 to 20 degrees colder than modern averages in the same regions, suggesting the empire dealt with climate conditions that would challenge even today's heating technology. But peasants couldn't retreat to heated villas like the wealthy. They needed shelter that could withstand months of brutal cold. When faced with temperatures that could kill, Roman peasants did something that would surprise most people. They went underground. Archaeological excavations across northern provinces reveal that a staggering 60% of rural Roman homes were partially buried beneath the Earth's surface. This wasn't desperation. It was brilliant engineering, borrowed from the very people Rome had conquered. Celtic and Germanic tribes had perfected underground construction techniques over centuries, and Roman peasants were smart enough to adopt what worked. They dug down 4 to 6 feet below ground level, creating homes that took advantage of the Earth's natural insulation properties. Modern geothermal engineers would recognize the principle immediately. Soil temperature remains relatively stable year-round, hovering around 45 or 50 degrees even when surface temperatures plunge below freezing. What makes this even more fascinating is that Roman military engineers, the same people who built roads and aqueducts across the empire, actually learned these winter construction techniques from local peasant communities. Engineering manuals from Roman military camps describe adapting barbarian building methods for army winter quarters. Talk about swallowing your pride for survival. Peasants showed remarkable resourcefulness in their construction materials. Archaeological evidence from sites like Vindolanda in Britain shows peasant homes built with stone foundations salvaged from abandoned Roman villas. When the empire's wealth moved on, peasants recycled what remained, creating underground walls that could withstand both winter cold and centuries of time. The construction process required careful planning. Peasants would dig their foundation holes during late summer, line them with available stone, and build up from there using whatever materials they could gather: wood, clay, thatch, and more salvaged Roman masonry. The result was a dwelling that stayed consistently warmer than anything built on the surface. Of course, even the best underground shelter was useless without a reliable way to generate heat inside. Roman peasants couldn't afford the elaborate hypercore systems that warmed wealthy villas, but they weren't about to freeze while the rich stayed cosy. Instead, they created their own ingenious heating solutions that often worked better than what money could buy. Archaeological evidence shows these resourceful farmers developed simplified versions of Roman heating technology using clay pipes salvaged from abandoned buildings and whatever materials they could scavenge. Most peasant homes featured central fire pits surrounded by carefully arranged stones, a design borrowed directly from Celtic roundhouses. But here's where Roman engineering knowledge made the difference. Peasants didn't just dig holes and light fires. They created sophisticated false floor systems, using broken pottery shards, stones, and clay tiles to channel heated air throughout their underground homes. These makeshift heating systems were remarkably effective. Modern analysis of reconstructed peasant heating arrangements shows they achieved 40% better efficiency than medieval heating systems developed centuries later. How did they manage this? The combination of underground construction and channeled airflow created a heating system that retained warmth long after fires died down. Some communities took cooperation even further, developing shared heating systems that connected multiple families to one large heat source. Archaeological excavations at sites in Roman Britain have uncovered evidence of communal heating arrangements where clay pipes carried heated air from a central fire pit to several nearby homes. Imagine splitting your heating bill with 3 neighbours. Except instead of money, families contributed labour, materials, and fuel. Roman military manuals actually documented these peasant heating techniques, describing how soldiers could adapt civilian methods for winter camps. Field engineers learned to create temporary heating systems using broken pottery and stones, techniques that proved invaluable during long Germanic campaigns. But generating heat was only half the battle. Peasants needed fuel that would burn through the long winter months. Finding enough fuel to last through months of freezing weather required creativity that would impress any modern survivalist. Roman peasants burned everything imaginable. Olive pits from oil production, dried animal dung collected throughout the year, and even broken furniture when desperate times called for desperate measures. Archaeological excavations at peasant sites have uncovered burned remains of old tools, worn-out leather shoes, and wooden household items, proving that when survival was at stake, nothing was too precious to sacrifice. Charcoal production became a crucial peasant industry during autumn months. Families would spend weeks creating charcoal stockpiles using traditional techniques learned from local tribes. These weren't small operations either. Archaeological evidence from sites in Gaul shows charcoal production areas large enough to supply entire communities through winter. The process required precise timing and temperature control, skills that peasants passed down through generations. What's particularly fascinating is how Roman military units learned fuel conservation techniques directly from peasant communities. Military documents describe soldiers adopting peasant methods for making fires burn longer and hotter while using less fuel. Techniques like banking coals with ash, creating fuel mixtures that burned more efficiently, and strategic fire management became standard military practice after officers observed peasant families stretching limited fuel supplies through entire winters. Some communities developed sophisticated fuel-sharing systems that would rival modern cooperative arrangements. Families took turns maintaining communal fires, contributed different types of fuel based on what they could gather, and established rotation schedules that ensured fires never went out completely. Economic records from Roman Britain show peasant families trading fuel like currency, 3 bundles of charcoal for a pile of dried dung, or a week's worth of wood scraps for help maintaining someone else's fire. Keeping fires burning required constant attention, but peasants also needed to think about what they'd eat when the fields were frozen solid. When autumn harvest ended and winter loomed, Roman peasants faced a life or death challenge that required months of advanced planning. They had to preserve enough food to survive until spring, and their techniques were so effective that Roman agricultural writers actually documented peasant methods as superior to wealthy Roman preservation practices. Salt became liquid gold for meat preservation. Peasants who lived near coastal areas or salt springs had a distinct advantage, using salt to cure pork, beef and game meat that would stay edible for 6 to 8 months. The process required precise ratios. Too little salt and the meat rotted. Too much and it became inedible. Archaeological analysis of preserved meat found at peasant sites shows they achieved salt concentrations that modern food scientists consider optimal for long-term preservation. Grain storage demanded equally sophisticated techniques. Peasants dug underground storage pits lined with stones and sealed with clay, creating environments that kept wheat and barley fresh throughout winter. These weren't simple holes in the ground. They were engineered storage systems that controlled moisture and temperature. Some pits found in Roman Britain still contained recognisable grain after 1,500 years. Perhaps most ingeniously, peasants adopted fermentation techniques from Germanic tribes to create vitamin-rich winter vegetables. Sauerkraut, pickled turnips and fermented cabbage provided essential nutrients that prevented scurvy and other winter diseases. Archaeological evidence suggests the average peasant family stockpiled 400–600 pounds of preserved food each winter, enough to feed a family of 6 through the harsh months. Roman writers like Columella praised peasant preservation methods, noting that rural families often maintained better nutrition through winter than wealthy Romans who relied on expensive imported foods that sometimes spoiled during transport. Even with stockpiled food, peasants had to turn whatever they had into hot, warming meals during the coldest months. Turning preserved ingredients into hot, nourishing meals required a cooking technique that Roman peasants perfected into an art form, the perpetual stew. These weren't simple soup pots, but sophisticated cooking systems that kept families fed and warm throughout the entire winter season. Archaeological evidence shows peasant families kept large clay vessels simmering over their fires for weeks at a time, adding fresh ingredients daily while never completely emptying the pot. The cooking vessels themselves tell a remarkable story. Clay pots found at peasant sites show continuous use marks from months of constant heating, with some vessels displaying wear patterns that suggest they were kept at cooking temperature for entire winter seasons. These pots were specially designed with thick walls and wide bases that distributed heat evenly, preventing the bottom ingredients from burning while new additions cooked properly. Each day brought new ingredients to the communal pot. Peasants would add whatever they had available: preserved meat, stored vegetables, wild herbs, even bones for extra nutrition. Roman writers noted with amazement that peasant stews often contained 15 to 20 different ingredients by winter's end, creating complex flavours that impressed visitors from wealthy Roman households. Archaeological analysis of cooking residues reveals something surprising about peasant cuisine. Sophisticated seasoning, using both local wild herbs and imported spices. Evidence suggests that even rural peasant communities had access to black pepper, cumin, and other valuable spices through trading networks that reached the farthest corners of the empire. The nutritional benefits were substantial. These perpetual stews extracted maximum nutrition from every ingredient, creating vitamin-rich broths that sustained families through months when fresh food was impossible to obtain. The constant cooking process also made tough preserved meats tender and digestible. While hot food warmed them from the inside, peasants needed clothing that could protect them from the empire's harsh winter winds. Roman peasants understood something that would take modern clothing designers centuries to rediscover. The secret to surviving brutal winters wasn't one perfect garment, but multiple layers working together. Archaeological evidence showed peasants wore 5 to 7 layers of clothing during the coldest months. using techniques learned from the very Celtic and Germanic peoples Rome had conquered. The foundation of peasant winter clothing was the wool cloak, called a sagum, a garment that became so associated with survival that Roman military units adopted it for northern campaigns. These weren't simple wool blankets thrown over shoulders. Peasants waterproofed their sagum cloaks using animal fat, creating outer layers that shed snow and rain while maintaining insulation properties. Beneath the wool layers, peasants wore sophisticated leather undergarments that provided crucial wind protection. Archaeological analysis of leather fragments from peasant sites reveals advanced leather working techniques, including methods for creating soft, flexible inner layers that didn't restrict movement. These leather pieces were often lined with fur or wool, creating garments that functioned like modern thermal underwear. Perhaps most ingeniously, peasants developed leg wraps called fasciae cruralis that provided better warmth than traditional Roman leg coverings. These weren't simple cloth strips, but carefully designed wrapping systems that trapped warm air around the legs while allowing freedom of movement. Military records show Roman soldiers quickly adopted these peasant leg wraps for winter campaigns, finding them superior to standard military gear. The layering system worked so well that Roman military manuals began documenting peasant clothing techniques for army use. Evidence from military supply lists shows legions stationed in northern provinces requisitioned peasant-style clothing rather than relying on standard Roman military uniforms. But even the warmest clothes couldn't protect against frostbite without proper footwear designed for winter survival. Roman peasants knew that frostbitten feet meant death, so they created footwear that put Roman military boots to shame. Archaeological evidence reveals peasant boots constructed with multiple layers of leather, each layer serving a specific purpose: outer protection, insulation, and inner comfort. These weren't crude farm shoes, but sophisticated winter survival gear, stuffed with wool, dried moss, or animal fur to create insulation that trapped warm air around the feet. The construction techniques were remarkably advanced. Peasants developed waterproofing methods using tree sap mixed with animal fat and beeswax, creating treatments that kept feet dry in snow and slush. Archaeological analysis of preserved peasant footwear shows waterproofing that remained effective for months of hard use, far superior to the basic leather treatments used on standard Roman military caligae. What makes peasant footwear even more impressive is how communities approached bootmaking as a cooperative effort. Archaeological sites across Roman Britain and Gaul show evidence of communal workshops where families shared specialised tools and pooled materials to create winter footwear. These weren't individual family projects, but community survival operations where the best leather workers taught others and everyone contributed materials based on what they could provide. Roman military commanders quickly recognised the superiority of peasant boot designs. Military manuals from northern provinces describe adopting peasant waterproofing techniques and insulation methods for army footwear. Supply lists show legions specifically requesting peasant-style boots rather than standard military issue, particularly for winter campaigns in Germania and Britain. The difference in quality was striking. While wealthy Romans wore thin leather shoes designed for Mediterranean climates, peasants created boots engineered for survival in conditions that could kill within hours. Protecting their extremities was crucial, but peasants also discovered that sharing body heat with some unexpected companions could mean the difference between life and death. Roman peasants discovered that the best heating systems had 4 legs and ate hay. When winter temperatures plummeted, families brought their livestock indoors, transforming cattle, pigs and goats into living furnaces that could generate up to 8,000 BTUs of heat per day. Archaeological evidence shows that 70% of rural Roman homes in northern provinces had integrated animal housing areas, complete with drainage systems and feeding areas designed for months of cohabitation. This wasn't random desperation. peasants calculated exactly which animals provided the most heat relative to their food consumption. Cattle topped the list as the most efficient heaters, producing massive amounts of body heat while eating stored hay that families had stockpiled during summer. Pigs came second, generating substantial warmth while eating food scraps that would otherwise go to waste. Goats provided steady heat output and required minimal winter feed, making them perfect for smaller families. Roman agricultural writers documented the health benefits of this arrangement with surprising detail. Columella noted that families sleeping near cattle experienced fewer respiratory illnesses during winter, while Varro observed that the humidity from animal breathing helped prevent the dry coughs that plagued urban Romans during cold months. Modern analysis confirms these observations. Animal respiration creates humidity levels that reduce winter health problems. Some communities develop sophisticated rotation systems to maximize heating efficiency. Families would move animals between houses based on weather conditions, ensuring that the sickest or most vulnerable family members always had access to the warmest animals. Archaeological evidence from sites in Roman Gaul shows communal animal housing areas, where multiple families shared large livestock during the worst winter storms. Roman medical texts even prescribed specific animals for different health conditions, recommending sleeping near sheep for joint pain and near goats for digestive problems. While animals provided warmth, peasants still needed to venture outside for essential tasks, requiring specialized tools and techniques. When peasants had to leave their warm, animal-heated homes, they relied on an arsenal of specialized tools that meant the difference between completing essential tasks and never returning alive. Archaeological evidence shows the average peasant family owned 10 to 12 winter-specific tools, each one carefully crafted and maintained through generations of harsh seasons. Snow removal tools topped the priority list, but these weren't simple shovels. Peasants created sophisticated snow-clearing equipment using hardwood handles and metal blades salvaged from abandoned Roman sites. Archaeological finds show these tools incorporated bronze and iron components recycled from Roman military equipment, villa hardware, and even broken farming implements. The result was equipment that could move heavy, wet snow more efficiently than anything Roman engineers had designed for urban use. Ice-breaking equipment was equally crucial for accessing water sources during frozen months. Peasants developed specialized ice-cutting tools with weighted heads and sharp points designed to break through ice layers up to 2 feet thick. Some communities created communal ice-breaking operations, with families taking turns maintaining access to shared water sources. Perhaps most ingeniously, peasants perfected portable fire-starting kits that worked even in wet conditions. These weren't simple flint and steel arrangements, but sophisticated systems involving char cloth, dry tinder stored in waterproof containers made from animal organs, and multiple backup ignition methods. Archaeological analysis shows these kits contained 6 to 8 different fire-starting components, ensuring peasants could create flame even after being caught in snowstorms. Roman military units recognized the superiority of peasant winter equipment. Military records document numerous instances of legions trading standard army gear for peasant-made tools, particularly icebreakers and fire-starting equipment. Some peasant families became specialized tool makers, creating winter equipment that they traded throughout their regions. These tools were essential for winter survival, but peasants also developed sophisticated techniques for predicting and preparing for the worst weather. Roman peasants developed weather prediction skills that put official Roman forecasters to shame, using techniques that combined generations of observation with surprising scientific accuracy. They watched animal behavior with the intensity of modern meteorologists. Cattle gathering in tight groups signaled approaching storms, while pigs collecting extra bedding materials meant severe cold was coming within 24 to 48 hours. Wild birds flying in unusual patterns, dogs becoming restless, and even changes in how smoke rose from fires all provided crucial weather intelligence. Plant signs offered equally reliable predictions. Peasants observed how tree branches moved in changing air pressure, monitored when certain flowers closed their petals, and tracked how quickly morning dew evaporated. These weren't superstitious folk beliefs. Roman agricultural writers like Pliny documented peasant weather lore and considered it more reliable than formal Roman meteorological methods. Archaeological evidence shows peasants took storm preparation seriously, building reinforced storm shelters separate from their main homes. These weren't simple dugouts, but sophisticated emergency structures with reinforced roofs, multiple entrances, and storage areas for emergency supplies. Some shelters could house entire extended families for days during severe weather events. Communities developed early warning systems that functioned across entire regions. Smoke signals during daylight hours and horn calls that could travel for miles warned of approaching storms. Archaeological sites show evidence of elevated signal posts positioned to relay warnings from valley to valley, creating communication networks that covered hundreds of square miles. The accuracy of peasant weather prediction impressed even skeptical Roman officials. Historical records show that peasant forecasts were often correct when Roman urban forecasters were completely wrong, particularly for predicting the timing and severity of winter storms. When storms did hit, peasants relied on community cooperation and mutual support systems that kept entire villages alive. Survival during Roman winters required more than individual preparation. It demanded community networks that modern disaster relief organisations would recognise and respect. Roman peasant communities developed sophisticated resource-sharing systems that ensured no family faced the brutal months alone. Archaeological evidence reveals communal food storage facilities that served multiple families, with carefully designed distribution systems that guaranteed fair access to shared supplies during emergencies. These weren't informal arrangements based on goodwill. Roman legal documents record formal agreements between peasant families detailing winter mutual aid obligations. Who would provide what resources, how tasks would be divided, and what constituted fair contribution to community survival efforts. Legal papyri from Roman Egypt show contracts specifying that Family A would provide grain storage, Family B would maintain communal fires, and Family C would handle childcare during storms. Rotation systems kept essential services running even during the worst weather. Peasants created schedules for maintaining fires, caring for children and elderly, and checking on isolated families. Archaeological sites show evidence of communal firekeeping areas where families took turns ensuring heat sources never died completely, even during multi-day blizzards. Emergency rescue protocols saved lives when individual families faced disasters. Communities established procedures for responding to structural collapses, families trapped by snow, or medical emergencies during storms. Roman records describe peasant rescue operations that successfully freed families from collapsed roofs and provided emergency shelter when homes became uninhabitable. The efficiency of these systems impressed Roman military commanders, who adapted peasant mutual aid techniques for army winter camps. Military manuals describe adopting peasant rotation systems and resource-sharing protocols for maintaining morale and survival during long Germanic campaigns. These cooperation networks were especially crucial for protecting the most vulnerable members of peasant communities. Roman peasant families understood that children and elderly were the first to die in harsh winters, so they developed specialised protection systems that prioritised the most vulnerable. Sleeping arrangements became carefully engineered survival strategies, with families creating heat cocoons, where children and elderly slept in the warmest positions closest to fires and surrounded by the healthiest adults who could generate the most body heat. Archaeological evidence reveals clothing specifically modified for different age groups. Children's winter garments show extra insulation layers and ingenious design features like attached mittens and foot coverings that prevented loss of crucial clothing pieces. Elderly family members received specially constructed wool wrappings that provided extra warmth around joints and extremities, where circulation problems made frostbite most likely. Peasants developed indoor exercise routines specifically designed to maintain circulation in vulnerable family members. These weren't random activities, but systematic movement programs that kept blood flowing to hands and feet during long periods of confinement. Roman medical texts document peasant techniques for recognizing and treating early signs of hypothermia and frostbite, knowledge that often exceeded what urban physicians understood about cold weather medicine. Community protocols ensured that protection extended beyond individual families. Villages established priority systems where children and elderly received first access to the warmest shelters, hottest food, and driest clothing during emergencies. Archaeological evidence from communal areas shows seating arrangements and sleeping spaces specifically designed to accommodate the needs of different age groups. Roman writers noted with surprise that rural peasant communities had lower winter mortality rates among vulnerable populations than wealthy Roman households, despite having fewer resources. The difference lay in systematic community care rather than individual wealth. Beyond protecting individuals, peasants had to maintain their economic activities even when winter threatened their livelihoods. Winter didn't mean economic shutdown for Roman peasants. It meant shifting to different types of productive work that could generate income during agricultural downtime. Archaeological evidence shows peasant homes transformed into sophisticated production centres during cold months, with families engaging in textile weaving, metalworking and tool-making that required skills passed down through generations. Textile production became a major winter industry. Peasant families processed wool, flax and other fibres into cloth that commanded high prices in Roman markets. Archaeological sites reveal complex weaving equipment and evidence of large-scale cloth production that went far beyond meeting family needs. Some peasant communities became so skilled at winter textile work that Roman merchants established regular trade routes specifically to collect their products. Metalworking provided another crucial winter income source. Peasants melted down scrap metal salvaged from Roman sites, creating tools, weapons, and household items that they sold to other communities. Archaeological evidence shows sophisticated metalworking facilities in peasant settlements, complete with forges designed for indoor winter use, and specialised tools for working iron, bronze, and lead. Trade networks adapted to winter conditions with remarkable efficiency. Peasants developed specialised winter transportation using sleds, snowshoes, and cold weather pack animals. Some communities positioned themselves along winter travel routes, providing essential services like heated shelter, hot food, and equipment repair to Roman officials, merchants, and military units travelling during harsh weather. Roman tax records reveal something surprising. Peasant winter economic activities sometimes generated more income than summer agricultural work. Communities that specialised in winter crafts or services could earn substantial profits during months when agricultural communities had no income at all. Of course, maintaining economic activity during brutal winters required peasants to stay healthy, despite conditions that could easily kill the unprepared. Staying healthy during winter required more than just staying warm. Roman peasants developed medical practices that often surpassed the knowledge of expensive urban physicians. Archaeological evidence reveals sophisticated herbal medicine systems using plants that grew wild in northern provinces, with peasant families maintaining detailed knowledge of which herbs treated specific winter ailments like respiratory infections, joint pain, and digestive problems caused by preserved food diets. Peasant medical knowledge impressed even skeptical Roman writers. Pliny the Elder documented numerous peasant remedies that he considered superior to formal Roman medicine. Particularly, for treating frostbite, hypothermia, and the lung infections that killed urban Romans during cold seasons. Archaeological sites show peasant medical toolkits containing specialised instruments for treating cold weather injuries, some more advanced than equipment used by Roman army physicians. Prevention formed the cornerstone of peasant winter health practices. Families developed specific dietary routines that included fermented foods rich in vitamins, herbal teas that boosted immunity, and carefully planned nutrition programs that prevented scurvy and other winter diseases. Exercise routines designed for confined indoor spaces kept circulation flowing and prevented the muscle weakness that made people vulnerable to cold-related injuries. Community medical care ensured no family faced health crises alone. Villages established systems where the most knowledgeable healers treated patients from multiple families, sharing medical resources and expertise during emergencies. Archaeological evidence shows communal medical supply storage areas and treatment spaces designed for caring for sick community members during storms when individual families couldn't travel. Roman medical writers began incorporating peasant techniques into formal medical practice, particularly preventive measures and herbal treatments that proved more effective than expensive imported remedies. Military physicians adopted peasant cold weather medical protocols for treating soldiers in northern campaigns. These ingenious survival strategies enabled Roman peasants to not just endure winter, but to thrive in conditions that would have killed their urban counterparts.